I'd firstly like to thank the Gitxsan Nation and the chiefs, the elders, and members of Gitxsan for the invitation to be part of the Gitxsan Mining 101. I truly am grateful to be standing here on Gitxsan lands to do this presentation for you this afternoon. I'd also like to thank the Skeena Wild, especially Adrian, for all the efforts to put this together. Very important, and out of all the years that I have been working in Indigenous communities and with mining, this is the first event that I've ever been at that is Mining 101. So again, thank you. So Adrian asked me if I would come here today to basically do a play-by-play on all the stages of mining, basically from the finding the mineral, going into discovery, into exploration, advanced exploration, and then into the Full Mines Act. So today what I'm going to be doing is covering the 5 stages of mining. And right from the staking on into the full mine and into the mine closure. I'm not going to focus much on mine closure because I know the importance of today is pre-mining, pre-exploration, exploration, and not post-mining. So I'll be not really talking much on mine closure, but it is part of the whole of the 5 stages of the process. And I also wanted to just bring attention that every stage of the mining process is governed by comprehensive regulations. Again, I'm going to be more speaking on the proponent side because I've always worked on the proponent side. I've never worked with government or for an Indigenous community. So my talk will be more on, again, on the proponent side. So, with each mine, as a mine is developed, it can bring substantial jobs, economic benefits to the local communities. However, the wins do not come quickly or easily. And I threw these stats up just, again, for your information, is that 1 out of 10 exploration projects actually do go into the drilling phase. And out of those exploration projects, 1 out of 10,000 actually go in to be a full mine. So it's just a stat for, to appreciate, to know right now what some of the risks that are involved in exploration into full mine. Next slide, please. So Tony earlier today talked about the code. And the code was put together by Ministry of Energy and Mines, and it's what we need to follow when we go through to the whole exploration, permitting into the full mine. And it's a fairly thick document, and I really recommend that if you have a chance, I put the link up to go on to see what's all in the code, or you can get a hard copy from the Energy and Mines division in Smithers or Prince George. If we do not follow the code, then we're in non-compliance. And if we're in non-compliance, we are fined. Or our project can be stopped immediately. So it's very important. I did do a hard copy of my presentation, but I'd be more than happy to anyone who would like the electronic copy, I'd be more than happy to send. So let's start with staking, and I know we've been talking about staking a lot and what's happening with staking. So a geologist, either individual geologist and usually geologist, or it could be a prospector, or the company geologist, find a mineral. And then they want to see if this mineral could be a discovery. When dealing with the BC government in the ministry, it's always broken into either minerals or coal. Coal is always separate from minerals. So when I give this talk, I'll be saying minerals and coal. However, the permitting is the same, basically, for minerals and coal. So as a geologist or prospector, most of the information you get from the BC Geological Survey. The BC Geological Survey, the province has put together geologists to do all the mapping of the province. So if you go on the BC Geological Survey, you can see, again, what minerals are where. So we use that a lot, and then of course Tiara spoke about MinFile. We rely on that. I know we heard a lot about MinFile this morning, so I'll move on. And then we also use historical information, and especially when it comes to coal. We can, a lot of areas where coal was where the oil and gas industry was, so we can use a lot of the information from the drilling logs and from the core samples. Not so much in this area, with Groundhog and Panorama, but in other areas, particularly Northeast BC and down in Southeast British Columbia, we use a lot of the historical and gas information for the coal seams there. Airborne geophysics, we rely on, which is costly, but it gives a lot of good information. And as Gunther was saying earlier this morning, boots on the ground, going up there with the rock hammer and pounding. And just good old boots on the ground to determine if this mineral could be a discovery. So once a geologist determines that the mineral, after doing all their due diligence, could be a discovery, what they want to do now is secure their claim. And again, you heard this morning earlier, that is all done online through Mineral Titles Online. And actually, if you go on Mineral Titles Online, you can go put in the company name, and it will come back with what claims that company has. So it's basically public information, and I can show you how to do it, and I'll be here tomorrow as well, or later today I can show you how you can do it. But you just type in Atrim, and it'll come back, show you all the Groundhog claims, Panorama claims that the company has. So the important part here is that a prospector, geologist, or company geologist, they want to secure those claims before somebody else snaps them up. So as soon as they go online and secure those claims, nobody can take those claims. It's that companies and that geologist. So it's secure, and it's secure for 1 year. And I think Tony was talking earlier today about the cost. Basically, it's approximately about $1.75 per hectare to secure a claim. Each year, the company has to renew their claims and, of course, pay for the next year. I know with Groundhog, the claims on Groundhog were costing approximately just under $300,000, around between that $270,000 and $300,000 to maintain that 10-year those claims. Okay, staking. Right now, and I know there's with the Getsela, but I'm just talking right from today in the past. With staking, there has been no First Nation consultation, no engagement. There has been no environmental assessment work done, because again, as we talked about, it's been all online. No environmental assessment because there's been no surface disturbance. But once the claims were secured, then First Nation consultation did begin. Okay, sorry, my slide's missing a picture. I'm not sure what happened to it. So, as we've been talking, it's been a contentious issue, and I know so from what I'm hearing, and I'm sharing this information, what I'm hearing from the proponent side is that what they're concerned about is that if there is early engagement on staking a claim, that it will not be confidential anymore, that they could lose those claims, somebody else could come and scoop them up. My thoughts on it, and I agree with what Tony was saying earlier, is if I was going to go and stake, I would go to that First Nation and say, tell them what I'm doing, why I'm staking, what I will be doing, and how long I'll be in the area, be open, be transparent, and then ask if there could be some kind of confidentiality until I'm finished and know what I'm doing. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know the answer, but I know how important it is that you know who is on the land and who is staking what they're doing. I absolutely agree with that. But on the other side, the prospector, proponent is worried about word leaking out and somebody, after they've done all their work and due diligence, somebody coming and taking it on them. So it's be interesting, you know, as it goes on. It's going to be an 18-month process, so there'll be important that with the consultation and the discussion around the table on that. Okay, so once secured the claims and have the tenure, now we want to apply for an exploration permit. The first exploration permit is for drilling or trenching. The trenching is more common for the industrial minerals, like gypsum for cement or phosphate for fertilizer. The drilling, of course, is more common for coal and the minerals. We don't trench coal, we don't trench minerals, but. So, you've heard about the notice of work. We've spoken about the notice of work. The notice of work is basically an 8-page document, and it's all through the Energy and Mines division. And what I've done on the next this slide and the next slide, is I've taken the important parts that you might be interested in for the notice of work that the proponent needs to fill out or explain. So, first they're asked to do the permit for 1 year or 5 years. The permit does not last longer than 5 years. And then, of course, what we're expecting for maximum annual tonnage, if it's going to be a bulk sample. Lots of maps, all the maps of site disturbance, where we're going to drill, what we're going to do, where we're going to put waste rock. So there's lots of maps goes in. And then it asks for our First Nation communication log. So by the time a company submits this notice of work, they should have engaged and had discussion on the project. Because in the notice of work, they does ask for what First Nations have you engaged with and show us the log. When a company doesn't have that log, I'm not sure what the ministry does. They also ask for a cultural heritage resource information. If one has been conducted, like i.e. any archaeology work has been done, if they've gone out there with the First Nation to understand where the cultural sites are and what should be protected, so that's asked. And then there's a box, yes or no, has the proponent read UNDRIP, but you just tick it off, yes or no. Next slide, please. And then just to carry on more on the permit application, of course it asks, you know, how we're going to disturb, do we need roads, trails, helicopter pads, are we going to have camp services, get a number of drill holes, are we going to have a settling pond, what's the water supply, and how much timber, vegetation will be cut, and what equipment will be on location. All that information is then put into the calculation for the reclamation bond, and that's how the ministry comes up with the reclamation bond. Primarily on number of drill holes and how much surface disturbance there will be and how much timber cutting. And then the timber cutting too then determines if we'll need a license to cut permit as well. Okay, so what happens after fill out the notice of work application, it's sent to front counter of each of the regional office where the project is. The front counter reviews it. If there's any information missing, then comes back to the proponent, redo it. send it back. Once front counter is happy that all the information is complete, it then goes to the permitting officer of that region. In the groundhog situation, of course, it went to Smithers. The chief permitting officer, the permitting officer, reviews the application and now wants to meet with the proponent and then starts to go through the application, what else is needed. The permitting officer also sends that application out to the other branches of Ministry Energy and Mines. So again, remember, all this is still through Energy and Mines. We're not dealing with any other ministry. So the ministry will then send to the other divisions of Energy and Mines the technical experts, like the geochemists, the hydrogeologists, to make sure for the water monitoring and that, and wait for all their comments to come back if they have any questions, need more clarification. Once everything is complete and that permitting officer is happy that we've answered everything, then they put the package together and they send it out to the participating First Nations that will be involved in the project. And given a timeline of 45 days to respond. I've worked on projects where needed a longer timeline, so that 45 days doesn't, it's not a hard number, 45 days, so, but that's usually what the ministry aims for. Okay, so on the drilling, so just again, maybe drilling on the groundhog, for example, or not groundhog, the panorama, over the number of years we drilled about 25 drill holes in that, but so say we apply for a permit, 40 drill holes. The consultation engagement, absolutely yes. There should have been consultation, accommodation, engagement, explaining where we're drilling and what the operation will be and getting water supply. Agreements. What I've seen, and I agree, is the capacity funding agreement, number one. All the projects I've been working on in the last number of years we started off with a capacity funding agreement because you will need to review these permits. When the ministry sends them out to you, you have to either within the community or hire a technical person to review the permit. And of course that's time and it's money. So you should ask the proponent for capacity funding. We'll also do agreements on the communication, or called engagement agreements, called phase one. And this is how we will work together. The protocol of working together. And of course, with the opportunities in there for jobs, training, benefits will be, and that's very, very common. What I have seen over the years too is now the different nations appreciating the difference between a junior exploration company and a mining company. When we first started doing capacity funding agreements and engagement agreements, it seemed like it was one agreement for all, like get the same, be asked to pay the same capacity funding or engagement agreement that Teck is getting asked, or Rio Tinto, the big companies, versus a junior exploration company. But what I've seen is working in Southeast BC and Talltown now are doing this, and a few other bands, is that they have different agreements for what that company is doing, what that proponent is doing, if they're doing a small exploration program or they're actually looking at going into mine development. And of course, two is the number 4 on the screen, cultural impact studies. Yes, archaeology assessments are done prior to any surface disturbance. So before I do any drilling, any site disturbance, the artwork is done. And we will always send First Nation of the area to go with the archaeologists to identify plants, berries, trails, cultural sites. So that was important. So again, there's no environmental assessment. The only on a drilling what the ministry was asking, and the projects that I've been working on and to just reset were the quarter water samples to be taken and analyzed. And then also the what we call the acid rock base accounting, and you might have heard the word selenium, and that comes from a lot of the waste rock from coal mines, and particularly it started in around 2010, 2011, where it was identified where the waste rock from the open pit coal mine was put on the side, and then a chemical reaction with the rainwater, etc., caused acid drainage into the soil and the groundwater. So it's depending where the project is, the ministry could ask for the proponent to do acid-based accounting, leaching, testing on the waste rock if it could potentially be acid rock. So that could be asked for the drilling or the exploration permit. There is a reclamation plan, and a security bond is put in place. Again, as I was mentioning earlier, it depends on the number of drill sites, timber cut, etc. And I guess I can share the groundhog project between the camp and the drill holes. That reclamation bond is now sitting right under about $700,000. But when Robert, do you remember when it started with the reclamation bond? Was it? It was like 300,000 around there. 200, yeah. But now with the camp set in there and everything, it's sitting at around just under 700. And I think that's what Catherine was mentioning as well. Once the company's done the drilling and all that, they think there is a resource there. Now they want to do an advanced exploration. We call that the bulk sample permit. The bulk sample permit is basically the same notice of work. All we do is tick off the box for the bulk sample. A bulk sample for coal allows to remove 250,000 tons of rock. Out of that 250,000 tons of rock, there's about a 6-to-1 ratio of rock to coal. So it's not like 250,000 tons of coal coming out, it's 250,000 tons of rock and then whatever coal's in that rock. The reason they set that 250,000 tons is that over that, a company would need to then go into the BC environmental assessment. So if a company asks for bulk samples that's 250,000 tons for that, the government's a little bit suspicious, thinking, okay, you're just trying to get out of the environmental assessment. So usually a company for a bulk sample will ask for about 230,000 tons to take out, and that's for coal. For minerals, it's 10,000 tons. And again, the government likes a company to go in at about 9,000 because again, they're a little suspect when you're asking for like the maximum for the bulk sample. So for a bulk sample, it's a little bit more sophisticated. There's more work done on the regulatory side. There is an environmental assessment, but it's not, because it's under that trigger, 250,000 tons for coal, is basically what they call an environmental management plan. The environmental requirements again are continue on the water quality sampling, and now that you're going into the bulk sample advanced exploration, you're probably thinking that you're going to keep going on with that project, so you probably should have started baseline studies. You're doing more of the acid rock, because bulk sample, you're now piling waste rock on the side, so you need to do the, see if any of that rock could be acid generating to the groundwater. Again, reclamation plan security bond, again, based on the amount of work and site disturbance that you're doing, that the ministry comes back with and says this is what you owe. I was just working on a bulk sample application again down in Southeast BC, and for the bulk sample, the reclamation bond came in at around just under 400,000. Okay, mine review committee. There is not the mine review committee that would be associated with the full mine, and depending on the region, what they I've been involved in is called Enhanced Review Committee. Enhanced Review Committee is just scaled down from Mine Review Committee, but there is still a participant from each nation, from each division of government, and then of course the proponent. But sometimes in a bulk sample, depending again on the regional office, may not put together an enhanced review committee. However, if you ask, it would probably happen. Because the enhanced review committees that I was involved in, it was the First Nations that said to the ministry, we want to have, you know, a committee formed, the mine review committee and that. So again, this was something that you could be asking. Next. So benefit for First Nations, again, it's got to be ongoing consultation. You should be informed at every step, every change for that bulk sample. And you should be offered site tours to go out. Agreements, now I say possible because again it depends on the proponent, but there should be capacity agreements put in place. There should be phase 2 of engagement, a communications agreement, again how the proponent and nations will work together on the bulk sample. And again, there are economic benefits, and again that's discussion with the proponent, and again through logistics and you name it, and particularly now there's going to be more environmental work done, so the environmental monitors and more archaeology work done, and so the list goes on, and again that's discussion with the proponent. And cultural impact studies, yes. And again, it's just all intensified from what the original drilling. I left this page blank, and the reason I handed out a table of contents of what is involved in the environmental management plan, just so you could see it's quite detailed environmental management plan. And like it asks for the environmental risk assessment, fish and fish habitat, you know, the environmental monitoring, wildlife, soil erosion and all that. So it's something you can refer to or use it in the future for what, I always thought this was a very detailed table of contents to put together an environmental management plan. Okay, going into full mine, there's a picture of the Bruce Jack mine. And when you go into a full mine, now you should have your baseline studies almost completed, especially the water monitoring. And when you go into a full mine, it's called a major project. You're in with major projects offices in Victoria. And the Bruce Jack mine, just for your interest, they started putting all the gathering data back in 1999. It was 2015 when it was permitted for construction. So the average length of time now to go into full mine is going anywhere from 10 to 15 years. So this is where you get into the traditional land use studies and the traditional knowledge studies. And these are so important for the full mine. Been involved in a few of them, and doing the traditional land use studies for now on the mine design and where the infrastructure of the future, possible future mine. The traditional land use studies are really, really helpful on where the company could do the infrastructure, the road building, that. So the traditional land use studies, traditional knowledge studies should be one of the first to happen when a company is thinking of going into a full mine. You need that information. The average, TLUS is the acronym of it, was taking about 3 months. You go in it, go for Monday to Friday and do some work, and then go the next week and do some more work. It's quite intense. And what Kirby was mentioning about confidential information, part of the traditional land use studies too is talking to the elders about what areas, cultural areas, they need to protect, where they fish, where they hunt, where they're berry picking. So all that was kept confidential between the proponent and the First Nation. It was not public, it was not released to government, and the government understood and did not ask for that information, but as long as the company knew where they had to stay away from. now this is also where we get into the mine review committee. So as soon as company applies to go into the full mine, so a mine review committee will be put together. There's regular meetings, and again, it involves discussion between the First Nation groups, disciplines of government, some local content, and then of course a proponent. The mine review committees are quite regular. They be at least on a quarter basis. And as the dates get closer and closer, there's more mine review committee meetings set up. And what now the proponent's working on is a pre-feasibility study, because of course they need to get more investor interest and financing and all that. And again, that's why they need the traditional land use study information. And then they go into a feasibility study, and then possibly a 43-101 to, again, for investor confidence and to put the millions of dollars out to build a full mine. So when you're going into a full mine, it reverses. Now the company's dealing first with the Ministry of Environment. Then by that, I need a BC Environment Assessment Certificate to advance, and then possibly the Canadian Environmental Certificate or the Impact Agency Assessment, which is what is now called. So now Ministry of Mines kind of steps back, and now the company's dealing strictly with Ministry of Environment. And when a company applies and enters the BCEA process, they're immediately given a project manager from the BCEA office to meet with on a regular basis, and the same one with the Canadian Assessment Office. So what I put together here, and it was, Tony kind of alluded to it earlier today, back in 2018, the BCEA revitalized the Environmental Act, and there was more focus on truth and reconciliation, on Indigenous engagement, and so that was revitalized in 2018, and then it was finalized, I think it was December 2019. So when the proponent, initially they put in a project description to the BCEA office. And then from that project description, again, engagement with the participating First Nations begins. And that process is basically 90 days. And then First Nations, it's called the EA readiness. The First Nations can consent or not consent after 90 days if they want to see that project terminated, or can be give consent to it, or just give an exemption on it. Now, it's a fairly new process, and actually just yesterday, there was the first company on the new revitalization process that was just awarded the BCA certificate, and that was Caribou Gold Project in the Williams Lake area by Barkerville. So it was the first company to actually get the certificate. So it's fair. There's not a lot of track record right now on how it's working and everything like that, but so it was revitalized and finalized in 2019. 2023, here we have finally a company that actually just got awarded the certificate. And the whole process along the way is about 570 days, which is about a year and a half. And the side, I'm not sure if you can read it because it's kind of on the side there, but it says must have consent from the First Nations right through the full process.
Sorry, I just wanted a little clarification on this piece, because my understanding was that the EA can still go ahead and be approved even if it doesn't receive consent. So there are opportunities for, I don't really understand, I think, what those opportunities for a notice of consent from the First Nation are worth if at the end of the day the province can still go ahead and approve the project. I don't know if that's something you can speak to, but.
Yeah. My thoughts, and then I'll let Tony maybe give his thoughts on it too, because we were actually talking about it earlier. So I know it all looks great, you know, the consent and no consent and all that, but you're right, at the end of the day, the minister still basically has the final say. But then the minister has to respond to why, you know, they let the project go ahead. And then I guess it would be going into dispute resolution. But Tony, you go ahead, because.
Yeah, thanks. A good question. Ultimately, the minister has final authority on issuing the EA certificate. Where First Nations government says we don't want a project to go ahead, we don't give our consent, the minister can override that, but has to provide reasons why he or she, the minister, made that decision. That process has not happened yet in terms of this new legislation. So everybody's waiting to see when that might occur.
And I haven't heard actually if any projects have been turned down. Like, I haven't seen that, and like, it's fairly new, you know, this whole process, and yeah.
We have one more question over here.
I guess that's why I'm so frustrated listening to this. We're not an issue as land title holders of this area. Nobody contacts us, nobody gets our consent until after the fact. One of the things that really hurts us is polluting water. 90% of our creeks are dead already. We're not going to stand up to anybody. Like, mine tailings are being filled up with our lakes in the Pacific Northwest right now as we speak, and the lakes are overflowing, and mine tunnels are being filled with tailings, and we're sitting around smiling at each other. It's and another fact is the mine company paying $3,000 a wolf to kill for destroying their habitat. Same with caribou. They're killing them off in the name of money. And reclamation, we've had all kinds of problems with reclamation. People claiming bankruptcy. Camas Mine is a good one. And the same way at the Pacific Northwest. They claim bankruptcy, change their name, and keep mining. I do have a letter in my pocket from 2 ministers in the province of BC stating the land is ours, and we have the only say. No other people, not even government has a say. Thank you.
Thank you. On the caribou, the government finally put moratorium on areas in northeast BC to protect the caribou. And in some areas, seasonal drilling only, because of course, plowing the roads to let the wolves in and people in to shoot the caribou. So a lot of the exploration now cannot be done during the winter, and then of course on the high elevation, low elevation. So that caribou, there was a caribou committee put in a few years ago, and so finally, and then of course agreement between the West Moberly First Nations and the government and Soto. Yeah, Soto First Nations. McLeod Lake didn't go in on that agreement to protect the caribou. So it took a while, but it finally slowly happened. And so again, it's just speaking out and government understanding what some of the concerns and issues are in certain areas. And that's basically all I have for today. And again, thank you for, it's getting later in the afternoon, so thank you. And I wish much success to what you have ahead of you with the land planning and on resource development. Thank you.